this is Jackie Snow again, in this operation was in a position to question the order given by my general. The only explanation that makes any sense here is that I was a soldier following orders that I felt were my duty to carry out. Part of the orders from the general was to send a fire team, a pre-attack under the call sign Trojan Horse. Trojan Horse's mission was to use a medical transport Humvee under the guise of giving medical care to insert a strike team. The strike team were ordered to attack the rebels from the inside to cause a mass confusion. Then our forces pushed in on the occupied town and wiped out everything that stood within it. The men were led to believe that any of these people still inside were to... Let me read this. The men were led to believe that any of those people still inside were to kill them. The civilians inside were innocent, had no control over what happened to them. And when the rebels came to their town, there comes a time when doing nothing becomes the greatest risk of all. The risk for me was my conscience. I spent a long time turning away from the truth I wanted not to face. My regret was not trying to change the course and face the truth. If I could go back to those moments that mattered the most, I would go back and try everything I could to continue our mission without destroying everything I worked for so far. These actions, along with the others, will always be my greatest regret of my military career. I will always have the same thought in the back of my head, back of my mind. I wish I had done something. I should have acted. These tactics existed in a war, a very different theater, and we should never be applied anywhere else. The lessons I learned on that day bring me to believe that these orders came from on top, the top of Sanguine, should have been challenged so that we had a chance to keep our moral compasses pointing in the right direction. Today, High Command are gathering a panel to discuss what part Brian played in sending a medic with an explosive device. Hindsight is a very powerful drug. So remember to ask yourselves truthfully, what would you have done in Brian's position? Would you have challenged the senator? Would you have truly tried to stand up and say no? The truth is, I don't think anyone can say that with 100% certainty. I do not believe Brian was in a position to do so. I want those at the panel to please take into account what was achieved by Brian in the MCU and to make any kind of assault possible. The work that was done to get the intelligence needed was incredible, and I believe that we may have lost the battle if we didn't have it. Remember, we may have won that battle, but most definitely have not won the war. It will continue, more people will die, and that problem will not go away by removing Brian from our ranks. I will, of course, respect whatever decision is made today, but we will need as many strong officers as possible to deal with whatever comes next in the war. There is obviously more that has happened that I do not have the full context on yet, and I do not want to comment fully on those without said context. I have absolute faith in our high commands and command team to make the most informed decision possible. Please contact me if you have any questions regarding my statement here. Signed, Trooper Jackie Snow.
That's very well written, and thank you for reading that, Owen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he would have liked to be here, but I'm glad he, he wrote something instead because he couldn't make it. But obviously, I think we all wanted him to be here, but so I'm glad we got his voice on things. Yeah. Okay. So, I guess we'll start off with the EMS thing. What's everybody's thoughts on that?
I was not a huge fan of the deflection brought about when we brought up what Bison had done. He couldn't remember what he said to Bison, which I personally don't. I don't believe that, but he kind of contradicted himself a bit in certain statements where he was saying that there was no chance that anyone could have known anything prior to Bison meddling, but he was also saying that they were twatting things out, and they. I mean, some of it just didn't line up for me, and I wasn't too happy to hear that. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it, Owen, because you were the one sort of uh, being the counterpoint to everything in our last conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to know, kind of now that we have the context from him, what you think about things.
And I will add really quick that I did get an official. Well, I got a statement from Veronica Mars. I met with her, so any questions on her side of things, just ask.
What's her statement?
I put it in note form. She wasn't comfortable giving like signing the documents or anything like that. I think because she's pretty broken by all this, if I'm being honest. I think it took a lot for her to come out of wherever she was hiding to even talk to me, and I had to essentially go off duty, put my phone away, and all that kind of stuff because she's genuinely concerned, given this has come out, for her safety. But
Out
her,
of curiosity, Dark,
yeah,
when you did that, was Nick Simone present?
yes, Nick Simone was present.
Okay, that's what he did to me as well.
Yeah.
That I think should also be taken into account. I don't disagree with Brian in that it is a bit inappropriate. I I don't trust Nick Simone. I don't think any of us should trust Nick Simone,
No.
but it is a concern that I have that he is influencing things. I trust what Veronica said. I believe that she was under some kind of duress. And I find it alarming that she didn't say anything, but I also find it alarming that uh, they wouldn't realize that she was under duress.
Yeah. As to your question, Owen, everything. This is the thing. Pretty much everything adds up. With kind of what Brian was saying, she stated that they asked for an EMS volunteer on radio, and nobody else was volunteering, so she did. Initially, Brian was kind of it didn't really tell her what was going on. It wasn't until Brian brought her to the center that the center explained what was going to happen. She specifically stated that Brian had a class 2 with a silencer on it, so that matches up with Brian's story. But what she told me matched up, with what Bison. I guess Tessa. I think you've spoken to both of them,
Yeah.
and their stories matched up. That's the kind of part for me that, I guess Brian not remembering things comes into question. Sorry, Owen. It was a bit of a convoluted answer, but
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if Nick Simone ever got the designation enemy of the state, but he definitely has a bone to pick with Brian and Axel and the rest of PD.
yeah.
I don't think he's I don't know. Yeah, I'm with Tessa. I think that's his presence influences the statement, certainly. I'm thinking I can clear up a few of my answers around the main thing before I get to the main thing. I'll go around and talk about the things surrounding it before I talk about the actual thing. So he says he never pointed the gun at Bison, which I guess is also what other people have said. So it's not. I heard he had pointed it, but I guess maybe he didn't. So that's fine. It just sounded like it was more of a threat, and he had the gun in his hands when he did it, and that was the implicit, I'll make good on my threat type thing. I I don't like threatening other officers. But last time we talked, I did kind of understand the need to. The gun in the hands definitely makes it more than just like a hey, please leave me alone. It makes it more of like something he would potentially follow up on because he's got the gun in his hands, regardless if he points it. He's carrying the gun. He's carrying the means to do it. And he's killed other officers before, so I don't know if that was going through Bison's head. I don't know if that was going through Veronica. I'm not sure she's even aware of that. That would definitely influence it.
I didn't even bring it up.
As far as the bombing itself, correct me if I'm wrong, because he did a lot of talking, but it sounds like it was the senator's orders. It was the senator's idea, and Brian facilitated the execution. And for that, I find it hard to lay blame because, like Snow said, Bison stood up to them, but who else would have? I could verify what Snow said in his statement. I was involved in a lot of that. When it comes to false flagging, as a medic, he's talking about the Trojan horse thing. That happens when he says medical Humvee. Maybe that doesn't really capture what happens. It was a medical ambulance with a Red Cross on it and everything. But I don't know. That probably doesn't sit as well with you guys as it does with me. Personally, I don't lay blame on Brian for facilitating the senator's orders. I can't do that. During the activities of a war, I think it's unrealistic and unfair to hold people accountable on a Monday afterwards for what happened in the heat of the moment when there were terrorists meters below them. It's not realistic, to be blunt. If we're calling it a war, and it is a war with a foreign country, and we're acting in the capacity of soldiers, there's no place for insubordination. If the senator says do something, then it should be done. There's no question about that. Now that we're back into not civilian life, but police life, there's more of a room to ask questions and more accountabilities. Police always have more accountability than soldiers. But, to answer the root of the question that Tessa asked, no, I don't have a problem with the way the bomb was done. It's ultimately the same thing I'm going to say. It's down to whether or not we think that that there could have been a reasonable expectation that the medic objected silently, and that's obviously a very tough conversation to have. So
for me, the follow-up of it, I'm sorry, do you mind if I just
I'm just going to say, because I think that it came up a little bit briefly about the bomb remaining with the medic in her pockets. I don't place much blame on that for Brian specifically, because I understand how he was in the hospital and he got back out. And I think there was probably a presumption that the doctors or other cops would have removed the bomb. I don't lay blame on him for leaving the bomb with her. It's unfortunate it happens, and it should not have happened. But if Brian got blown up by an RPG and then went back to finish detonating the islands, I think he probably assumed other people handled it, and maybe there was a duty for him to inform other people to do it, but I can't really blame him for being in the hospital. But anyway, go ahead, Reed.
I think there's a miscommunication on that part, because I was made aware by one of the officers the other day that there was a meeting after the fact and they asked if EMS had a bomb and he declined, because I'm assuming it's because they asked if it was strapped to the EMS. So he said no. But as far as people who, may have been able to follow it up were aware there was, they were claiming that it wasn't them, He contradicted himself as well. He said that, Bison would have been the one to tell everyone it was being tweeted out. But like in actual fact, I don't know if they necessarily knew that it was planted until the people of Sanguine started tweeting it out.
Well, I know that I was informed pretty much immediately after the fact. So if we hold Brian accountable for the bomb remaining on her. I was on the mainland that day. I was given this information. I was told about the plan and the plot. I was in charge of assisting with the medical treatment of people coming from the island. And if you want to hold Brian accountable for that, then you're going to have to hold me accountable too. Because I did not search anyone. I did not go and pick things off of anyone. That's entirely on me, and I'll accept that. But it just wasn't something that was running through my mind that day. I was
And that's
dealing
fair.
with
It's less of, for me, it's less of like, him going and removing it. As long as other people were aware that it was there, then there's less of a problem, right? If he had sent them in and no one was aware that it was on her, no one was aware for sure that that was the case, then that would be, that's where I would have the problem. If people were aware and there was people who were able to do that, then
I was aware.
it's not his problem,
And I probably could have gone and tried to find her and tried to get that item. But my presumption in that situation was that if a group of psycho terrorists who wanted to bomb people found that medic with C4 on her person, my assumption would not be that they would have left that on her. Ever. I would not have guessed that. When I was informed of that, I was shocked to find out that they hadn't taken it off of her person to try and utilize it in the war. That fascinated me. I have no idea why they wouldn't have done that. Maybe it was to prove a point and for shock value to, send her out with the bomb and, to prove their point. But that was not anywhere in my mind on that day that she would have had that still on her person. And I get that he may have deflected. I wasn't at that meeting or whatever may have happened, and I didn't hear what was asked. But that part of it, I don't feel comfortable blaming Brian when I could have been just as accountable for that. I think that was just kind of, because I knew that it was that bomb existed, that C4 existed. But I didn't think, it didn't cross my mind to go and collect it, because why would it still be on her? I would never have thought that in a million years. That's just kind of where I'm at, to be honest with you. And if people were asking him questions about things like that and he didn't answer, that's a whole different thing, I think, than him forgetting to tell someone to, hey, go collect this C4. Because why would he think that it's still on her person?
Yeah, like I said, it's not, for me, it's not about whether or not he went and got it, whether or not he told someone to go and get it. It was as long as someone else was aware that, like, for sure it was on her person, so that, it could be recovered.
Yeah.
That's what's important to me. And if he did make people aware, you were aware, then, that's less of an issue.
As long as there's a reasonable expectation that someone would have handled it, I don't blame him.
Yeah.
So I think we can move on. When it comes to the Bison thing, I mean, we can get into whether Bison's in trouble or Bison did this or that, but I'm pretty sure Axel said, may he rest in peace, that he'd already done all that. So I'm going to stay away from placing anything on placing any blame on Bison because it's already been handled. But as far as threatening him, I just do want to reiterate. There's been times where I'm planning something sensitive, and for some reason, people feel entitled to walk up and just start listening for whatever reason. It's happens many, 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 many times. Have I responded in a way that's probably not? I I don't want to say appropriate because that kind of like is influencing the rest of the conversation. But have I responded in a way that's probably not appropriate? Yeah, absolutely. Did I have a gun in my hands when I did it? Absolutely not. You know, it was clearly an empty threat. Like, please, can you leave us alone for a minute? And the
Yeah.
expectation should always be that just because someone did something wrong by walking up to you and trying to eavesdrop on a potentially very sensitive conversation, we're still, it doesn't justify a death threat. You know, it doesn't justify
Hey, it's
an
coming
actionable one
round.
too. So there's definitely blame to be placed on Brian for that, in my experience, in my opinion. But like I said, I'm not going to blame Bison for it. So I mean, I think he's got to be cognizant of what he says to people and the way he says it. And when I look at this, I'm looking at this as more of a indicator about how he's going to go forward as a police officer than anything else, because I don't think it's fair to hold him. I don't think it's fair to say he's not going to be fit to be a police officer because he engaged in this EMS bomb thing. Because to be honest, it's very unlikely any of us end up with a bomb ever again, or in a situation where this could even be conceivable. And it's also clear from the way he talked about it that he's not going to do it again, even if he was given the opportunity to. So it's one of those things where I think the likelihood that we end up in the same scenario where he could do this, very low. And do I think he would do this again if given the opportunity? Very low. However, that changes a lot when it comes to the Bison thing, where I do think that same situation could happen very easily, where if he stays on as any role, might have someone walk up to him, and he might react the same way. And you know, I mean, it's wartime, right? So of course he has a gun out. That's his excuse. Is it's active war. Of course he has a gun out, but that's not an excuse. You need to be cognizant of what's in your hands when you say something like that. You know, you're still responsible for your actions, independent of what's in your hands or what the situation is. I think you guys might disagree with this, but I'll say my piece is that I think the worst thing he did on that day was threatening Bison, because the sole responsibility of the bombing was the senator. The senator gave the order, and Brian facilitated it, for better or for worse. And much like Snow, there's a lot of times I wish we could go back and ask questions and question orders, but it's not appropriate as soldiers.
I think I do understand where you're coming from there. Like I do get it, and same with Snow. But I think this is a very atypical situation in which PD have been asked the most of, and a lot of them have done the brave thing and signed up to fight for that. So I guess the question is, regardless of whether or not someone is a soldier or a police officer, are we expectant of our officers to question decisions they consider to be morally wrong and going against the duties of a police officer, which is to protect and serve?
Well, I would counter that with one: he has no responsibility in that moment to fulfill the duties of a police officer, because he's not one. He was one before, and he will be one afterwards. But it was made clear by the senator, Axel, and everyone else that he was acting under the duties of a soldier, and those are not the same as a police officer. I think as a police officer, there's more of an opportunity to ask and question orders that you think are immoral. But as a soldier, I don't think you have the same leniency.
Okay. I understand that. And you don't have to do what Bison did and actively question it openly. But what stops you saying no? What stops you laying down your arms and saying, I don't want to do this?
I mean, potentially court-martial.
Right. But like I understand that's a consequence of that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not stopping, nothing's physically stopping them from doing that and saying no.
Well, I mean, I would argue that treason would be
Yeah.
a threat. You know, it's been stated that a senator can literally just decide they're going to charge you with treason if you go against their wishes, and
But at the same
I
time,
don't know.
I will say I don't think Brian was concerned about that. I don't think Brian was concerned about his job or about going to jail. I don't think Brian wanted to morally object to this. It seems from his testimony and from what he said today and the other accounts we have of the day, that Brian never stopped to question it. He never hesitated. He never wanted to question it. He went along with it wholeheartedly, more or less, right? So like we can try to argue on his behalf that he was scared of treason, or he was scared of going to jail, or he was scared of getting shot by the senator or whatever. But I don't think that's even an argument Brian made himself, so I don't want to make it for him. You know, if Brian had felt that way, he would have said something. He doesn't feel that way. So the question becomes, should we fire him for following the senator's orders during wartime? And to me, the answer is no. In the bombing specific instance, to be very clear.
Okay. What's everybody else's opinion on that? Unless we want
I
to.
mean, I know, I realize I made the argument that, treason would be a concern, but I will say that, and I'll reiterate this from our last meeting, if, I felt morally conflicted on something that a superior or someone was telling me to do, I would risk that. I'm not sacrificing who I am and what I stand for
Thank you, Tessa.
for someone to be a nutcase or do something heinous. That's just me, though. And I can't speak for what Brian would decide in that moment. So it's hard for me to argue this one because I wouldn't have made that choice. I would have probably stood up against it, and I would have probably questioned it as well as Bison. And I may have gotten in trouble for that. So I don't know.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as you, to be honest. And I know what Snow said about hindsight being 2020 and all that, but I think when you kind of hit the nail on the head, which is, we can say this, but Brian didn't. Brian had no, to me, showed no at any point during the questioning or anything, or even from his statements about being on the island.
Yeah, to keep it concise, Brian never made a moral argument. He never made I wasn't sure about this, and I was afraid of the senator. He never said any of that, so there's no reason to even consider that.
Stubble, Chief?
I mean, it's like I brought up the other day, it's are we acting as police on an operation, or is it like a military thing? Because if we're acting as police doing some kind of like raid operation or military operation, we have a question when we interview people, right? Like if you get an unlawful order from a superior, do you do it? And you don't, right? Because you have the responsibility to disobey that order because it's an unlawful one. And the problem with Sanguine is there's no laws, and it's different times. We're using tanks and fucking Grozers and jets and class 3s and rocket launchers. So it's like, what's the line? And regardless of that, it's like the morality thing of like a moral order, and can you use morals to disobey your supervisor's order? Because you go down that, it's like if we're in the middle of a shootout at like Little Seoul and we're like, hey, we're gonna go push in and shotgun this person in the face, someone might be like, morally, I don't want to do that, but that's part of the job. But what's Sanguine part of the job? And what's like, are they operating as cops? Which is what I keep going back to.
I think the fact it was referred to as a war by Axel and by the senator, I think there's a reasonable assumption that any person would assume they're acting as soldiers, not cops.
I don't think that they necessarily like can completely act as soldiers, I'll be honest. Like, I think that being that we go against these people every single day as police officers, I don't think we can just say, well, they're a soldier, they're acting as a soldier, because when they come back, they're not facing the consequences as a soldier. It's not the soldiers facing consequences, it's the police departments. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Yeah.
But, like, yes, acting as soldiers, but they're officers at the end of the day. People see them as officers. People saw them over there as officers, not as soldiers.
Mm.
We may have been under that understanding, but I don't think everyone was under that understanding.
When I approach it, I think if I was given the terminology war and that we're going to war and we're fighting a war, then I would assume that we're acting as soldiers, and I can't lay blame on someone for not acting as a cop.
Again, I don't like. I don't think anybody here is.
I'm just gonna order some food.
I think.
Keep going.
Okay. Yeah, we know that people weren't acting as cops because they were doing things beyond what cops normally do. And that's understandable. But then the question becomes, okay, did the things they did as on Sanguine, are we comfortable with having that kind of person as a police officer? And I don't think morals
Let's
go
say
out the
somebody did
window.
something really bad, right?
Well, that
Let's
question,
say-
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I want to see. We have Echo Squad, Turo and Velsinger on it. What would we have done if it came out that in the middle of the fight, Turo was like, "Hey, Velsing, I've always had this grievance against you," and then shot him in the head, and like straight up committed murder? Like, obviously, we'd be having a panel, but it's like the legality is that wouldn't be illegal, and that wasn't like a part of the military operation. That's kind of like where we're at. It's like,
Well, that's kind of an unfair analogy because
Yeah.
I don't know,
we're
it's
talking
just-
about
that
literally
quite
blue on
matches.
blue with no justification. Like, we're talking, I mean, the Brian thing is more complicated than that because I know some in this room feel like no matter what, the bombing was not okay. And some, myself included, probably maybe just me, feel like the bombing was justified because, well, assuming that this is going to be complicated setup, but if you assume that Brian thought the medic was consenting fully, then I don't lay blame on anyone for doing that, senator regardless, because it was a sacrifice to save the lives of potentially dozens of soldiers or cops or whatever you want to phrase it, going down that death funnel. So it's a much different setup than something just inherently morally wrong, which would be shooting your friend who poses no threat to you.
yeah. I mean,
That's
let's say,
not fair to say a blue on blue.
well, okay, let's say Bison is the one that volunteers to put the bomb down. Nobody has any issues, right? Like, if it was an officer, or if it was Brian, or if it was the senator that put the bomb down, there's no problems. I don't think
Yeah.
a single
Yeah.
person would have issues with that. And that's why there's the issue here. It's the medical issue. It's the sending in someone under the pretense. I mean, we've watched the documentary, right? They called the people of Sanguine and said, "We're gonna send someone down to perform medical on you and help you guys out." And it said they were gonna bomb them. Like that's where the big issue is. And it's war, right? Like, you've got to do some stuff that are unethical sometimes, but it's kind of like, where is that line? And you could also paint a picture of Sanguine just gunned them down anyway. They're psychos. And it was necessary to do stuff like, bombing them. But how we did it is where it went wrong.
I don't know if it is known or if it makes a difference, but according to Bison, he volunteered to go in place of the EMS as well. I don't know if everyone knows that.
I hadn't heard that.
And then what happened? What was the response?
Yeah. Was a...
That's, I believe, I can double check with him, but I believe after that is when they're threatened to kill him.
Yeah,
and sent
threatened to
down,
kill-
basically.
Okay.
Jesus Christ.
I could be wrong on the order there, but
Yeah.
he told me that he volunteered to go in place of EMS.
I guess one of the questions I would ask is if Bison is there willing to go.
Well, he's a cop. That fundamentally they wouldn't work. If the plan is to
Yeah.
disguise a
plan wouldn't
bomb as
go.
medical help, Bison wouldn't work flat out.
Couldn't Bison put on the EMS clothing or the
They
medic
know
clothing?
Bison. You don't
They
you
know
don't think
who
Clarkson knows Bison?
is.
You don't think
And
Pred knows
Pred.
Bison?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. I guess I'll retract the Bison part. Couldn't they have just asked for, a cop to pretend to be a medic?
According to Brian, there was not many cops left. Like almost none.
But
Yeah.
isn't that the issue? Is the going under the medical pretense?
Yeah, why?
To be blunt, I don't have a problem with going after the medical pretense. These people shot at the medics earlier in the war, as
Yeah, they
established
did.
by our own
Yeah.
objective reporting, is
Could
that
have used
these people
water.
were shooting medics unprovoked earlier in the war. I got no problem with sending a medic in with a bomb. The question is ultimately, did the medic consent to doing that, and did Brian know that she didn't? And on top of that, do we absolve him because the senator gave orders to? I absolve Brian because the senator gave orders, and it seems to me the medic did consent, at least in Brian's eyes, to what information he had at the time. The fault I place is what threatening to kill Bison in front of her, and threatening to kill Bison, period. I mean, I
Okay.
wouldn't have cared if they dressed up someone as a school teacher and said they're going to teach them maths or something. I don't,
Oh
whatever
my-
it takes to eliminate the threat.
Fluent.
These people are cannibals, terrorists, traitors to the state. If we can sacrifice one person to eliminate 20 of them in a chokehold, then I'm up for that. I don't care what pretense we need to use to do it. These people are monsters. However, that's not really what the question is anymore. I don't think. The question really needs to become: did Brian know or suspect that she had withdrawn consent silently? And if he did, then he should be in trouble for that. The question then becomes, can we hold him accountable even though the senator ordered him to? And I don't know that we can. That's my opinion.
My question to that is, should he be aware that when he's holding a gun and makes a threat, that immediately then puts the person he's asking to do something under duress?
Yeah,
I feel like he should know that.
he should know that. Yeah,
You
I
know, he
agree.
should be
I think that's where we
cognizant
align.
of that, and that didn't happen, and that's the concern of mine. That it just why wouldn't he not think of that?
Yeah, regardless of the reasons for holding a gun, he had perfectly good reasons to hold a gun. It's the threatening on top of holding the
Yeah.
gun that makes it like everyone had a reason to hold a gun. You shouldn't threaten someone if you're holding a gun, though.
Someone on your side, at least.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Maybe it's better to circle back towards this because I think
That's
we're
what I
kind
was
of
gonna
hitting an
say,
impasse.
yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, okay, so then
Because it might
there
just
was,
come to a point where we agree on enough other stuff that it justifies whatever we want to do without even going there.
yeah. Okay. I guess next on the list would be when I guess it was two instances. First, when I ordered Brian to give me the evidence of why we're going to war and stuff, and he did not follow that order and said to talk to the Senate instead. And then in a similar vein about when I questioned him about the EMS situation, he directed me, I guess, to the senator. What do we think on that?
Well, it seems that he's under the impression that he only answers to the commissioner's office for some reason.
Yeah.
And we don't really have a way to answer if that's true or not, if that's actually the case.
I mean, we
Not
do.
really a
We
lot of
can look at the
commissioners to ask.
SOPs that we all reviewed, right?
That's true.
I'm not a
Which,
fan of that.
I mean, it kind of puts
Well, I'm not a
that
fan
on
of either,
us.
but he is right in the sense that he did submit those for approval, and I wasn't high command when those got approved, but they
thought
were
I
ran
looked through
by
them.
high commands.
Like I have looked through them before, but I looked through them last night and I couldn't see it. I might be blind though.
They might have got rid of it.
I think regardless, I feel like we were never given a verbal indication that was the case. It was almost like it's like 3 words in a how many page document. Like I don't want to have to be reviewing something like a lawyer instead of cooperating with a sub department of the police department. Like, it doesn't feel like it's done in good faith, especially given the fact that Brian stated himself that it was a condition of his to I guess run MCU to not be under high command and instead be under the commissioner.
I just looked under it then. It may have been amended, but I was right when I looked under it last night. There's 2 mentions of the word commission. One is the major and the other one was priority cases are ones that the commissioner's office or the director specifically assigns to the MCU. So I don't even think it's clear in the SOPs who they report to, in my opinion. Like, it says it's a state commissioner's, a branch of that, but that does not mean that it does not fall under the chain of command of high command.
At the end of the day,
agree.
whose fault is that?
Here's what I think.
Yeah, I agree.
I think the MCU should answer, any detective unit, every unit, period, should answer to high command, not the commissioner's office. However, if the commissioner approves that MCU only answers to him, then it's hard for me to be mad at Brian for not answering to Dart because he was told he wouldn't have to.
I don't think that's anyone's fault. Like, we probably should have picked it up in the SOPs, but I wouldn't have necessarily gone looking for that in the SOPs either. Like, I was just under the assumption that it was like any other unit where the lead of that unit responds to high command. So I don't think that's anyone's necessarily fault.
Yeah, and I agree that we
It's just
shouldn't
a
have to review
miscommunication.
SOPs like a lawyer defines
Yeah.
loopholes where they exempt themselves from high
Yeah.
commands. However, it's clear he couldn't do this in the first place if Axel, Bass, or Toretti, whoever the commissioner was, didn't approve it. So, it's that's.
He may. Sorry, I keep interrupting you.
You're
Owen.
fine.
He may have been under the impression that the commissioner's office informed us, and he might have just not realized that he needed to verbally inform us because he thought we were aware.
Yeah.
How is he to know? It's just one of those communication things that we constantly are just having these problems, and it's not anyone's fault. It's just an amalgamation of bad comms, and we're trying, and I don't necessarily blame Brian for that.
Yeah. Same. Stubble, you didn't say anything for the last hour.
I said a little bit, but yeah, it's kind of like they threw it in like a little message and kind of got fucked on it. But we're aware of it. Like we said, we're taking the measures to fix it. Having Malton being like a person in between, a communications like director between MCU and us, and then I talked to Kovacic yesterday. He wants to try and get some like either weekly or bi-weekly reports through Malton to us. We don't have to like review and approve them to do everything. Just if we're curious to see what's going on, that information will be available to us. But I don't know. It is kind of strange that he wouldn't give us the reasons why he had to go through only the commission's office, and kind of ridiculous that was a thing, and I'm glad it's no longer a thing.
I guess my concern is when it comes to me ordering Brian, I guess, for the evidence prior to the war. So if, I guess then it comes up, and I want to get clarification on this because obviously I have a different opinion. But if a sergeant orders an officer to tell them something, and then that officer had already had a discussion with, let's say, a lieutenant, can the officer just say, I can't do that because, the lieutenant is the lead on this case or whatever? Like, because that's obviously it's on a grander scale.
Is that really comparable though?
I mean, is it?
I'm not too sure.
I mean, here's a
Kind of
better
is.
way to phrase it is, if I'm the sheriff, Stubble's the undersheriff. And let's say like Tessa, for the purpose of this example, is like a sergeant. If I tell Tessa she doesn't answer to anyone but me, and Stubble says, I want to know about this, answer me right now, is Tessa under obligation to tell Stubble? The answer to me is no. I don't
Yeah,
place
she'd be
blame.
disobeying the sheriff's order.
She'd be disobeying an order given. She'd be disobeying the previous instructions that she doesn't have to do that.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I understand.
It's a sticky one. It's something that shouldn't happen, but
Yeah, but it does, and
it did, and it does.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. So the next thing was the bison threatening situation, but that I think we've
Yeah, I'm
clarified
pretty clear.
that.
I'm not okay with that.
What about Brian making the bomb and then blowing up the villa when we had officers MIA still?
I mean, it sounds like from his recollection that there were no officers MIA, at least in the villa. It was swept and cleared, and then he was ordered. It was part of his instructions to get rid of the bomb-making bench and destroy it. So I'm okay with that.
I don't like
Anybody-
it, but it makes sense.
Yeah, I think I'm on the same opinion. Though I mean, we saw in the listen. I don't expect Brian to know this. Obviously, it's hindsight, but Moosebeard was down in the cellar where they were all held up. So he was definitely in the villa at some point, and we
Well,
had
it's
the same belief. Like he knew it. He saw them go in there, and we knew it. We saw them last seen at the villa. So that's why I was asking the questions. Is did we have a threat to officer safety that we had to leave? That we had to do that right there and then? And obviously, he said that there was the Eastern Bloc, so that's a possibility.
Depends if you think he's lying or not. That's what it comes down to. Because he says the entire place was swept for hostiles, friendlies, whatever. And if that's the case, then you either believe him or you don't. And you think he's maliciously trying to bomb officers or he's not. Because according to this, the picture that Stella posted, it looked like last visual of Moosebeard was in the room where he would have planted it now.
hold on.
So either he planted it next to Moosebeard, or Moosebeard had been dumped in the water or kidnapped or whatever happened to him.
So the C4 was sent in where officers were.
Oh yeah, in
You're
hindsight,
talking about the medics C4? Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, they were gonna
Oh
bomb.
yeah. There was
Moosebeard
tons of there was tons of injured officers there.
And
That's
if you look-
part of it is that you're basically. I mean, that kind of that's a messy argument about like technically every like grenade or shot fired near downed officers is that okay? And it's kind of has to be because when they're down on the ground, they're kind of out of the equation, right?
Yeah.
I'm not comfortable making that argument because
Yeah, it's a
even
messy one.
here in Los Santos, we have that issue where
Mhm.
I don't like this. I'm just going to touch this briefly because I don't like it. But if an officer goes down and a suspect's like, we're going to shoot him again, how do we feel about that? Because that's where I'm at on
Yeah.
that. And I think we're pretty
Yeah.
clear
I
that
think
that's
the
not
only
some
reason I
random
mentioned
name.
that was because I thought it was said that there was no police officers down there
They may have
where
meant that
the
in
C4 would
the.
have gone off. But
They may have meant
It's-
that like police officers up.
We'll be right
That makes
back.
sense.
yeah, okay.
I'm not trying to answer for him. I don't know. We could bring him back in if you wanted to.
I don't think it's that
Takes all the food.
imperative. I don't know.
Well, huh?
Yeah, I agree. It is what it is.
All right, thanks.
Okay, and then I'll wait for somebody actually. And no, we didn't have. So then we had the killing Divine situation.
I mean, he left this part out for some reason, and I wasn't going to correct him because I was curious where he was going with it. But prior to, in between the Divine and Axel going at each other's throats, and Toretti, Brian, and Axel trying to go and do what they did, there was a whole section where I was with Brian and Axel, and they were kind of running around with chickens with their heads cut off, trying to get to the island to talk to Divine or do something. And it's my own personal recollection that they didn't seem serious about killing them. They seemed You know, um, they seem pretty cooked, I guess. It's like it's hard to place intent there because I think they were kind of just running around like on their phones and shit, and I don't think we were ever within any kind of like reasonable "we're gonna kill him now" type of frame. I don't think we personally, from what I saw, I didn't think that they actually had any plans to kill Divine. I think they were just kind of panicking.
I mean, like I get that, but I think that they brought a sniper rifle, and Brian said they brought that sniper rifle in case they had to kill Divine. I don't think there's any excusing that, to be honest. Like up until
Well, I mean, that's like the equivalent of going to I don't know like go to a 911 call, like a disagreement between two people, and you bring your service weapon with you. Are you planning to use it? No. Do you need it just in case? Yeah, maybe. I don't
Right,
think that
but
makes them murderers.
yeah, but the intention to bring the sniper rifle was never to defend themselves; it was to kill Divine.
Well, I
It could have been.
specifically asked questions about that because I wanted to clarify when that plan was being made and why exactly. And he made it pretty clear that they were under the impression at that time that Divine had swapped sides. And, when we're talking about people committing treason, terrorism, stuff like that, we were planning on going to the island and probably killing everyone on that island. I is that any different than saying it about Divine?
But they were treasonous at that point. Like the treaty had not been broken. He was a civilian he was a Los Santos civilian.
They never said when they were going to carry out the assassination or whatever they were doing, though.
Right. I don't understand your point. I'll be honest.
I mean, at the time, we were going to arrest him because we thought he had. So the whole thing is, maybe this is like a missing piece for you, is that he was being charged with attempted murder for Dundee, right?
Yeah.
And the agreement was that we weren't going to do that until after his undercover operation finished and concluded, right? But because he resigns in a fit of rage or whatever, and said he's going back to the islands, he's now a fugitive. Now, if you frame it like that, the question becomes, do you fault someone for taking a gun with them to apprehend a fugitive? And I don't.
I think that you're simplifying the situation way too much because you're missing out all the context of that. Brian has admitted, I've got Bundy admitting on statement, Toretti has admitted that the four of them were talking about killing Divine, not bringing a gun to make sure that if things get bad, they can protect themselves. The sniper rifle was brought up as a method to kill Divine.
Because it's an assassination, not an apprehension.
Yes.
That's what their plan was.
So
But
I
they
think
tried to hide it with an apprehension.
Right. So I think the argument that the sniper was brought to protect themselves for an apprehension attempt that's just false.
Yeah, but this is like a borderline thought crime at this point where we're prosecuting him or not prosecuting, but we're coming at him for something he thought about doing and didn't actually act on.
Right, that's
something
conspiracy.
He thought about doing, prepared to do, but didn't do.
That's conspiracy. Conspiracy to commit conspiracy to commit murder. That's a crime.
Yeah, but if we apply this logic across everything we do, I think we'll all be in jail. You've never thought, man, I really would like to kill TJ Walker, or,
No, I've never done that.
Well, you're more honest than me, I guess.
Yeah, I think there's no argument that I think anybody here can make that with the facts that we've been given, we had members of the police department conspiring to commit murder. That's it. That's the truth.
While
And
on
that's,
duty and using their position of power to do it.
right. So if we want to defend that, then, well, I won't be taking part in that.
Where was his energy with Pred, man?
Sorry.
Where was his energy with Pred months ago?
What do you mean, Svensson?
Didn't we have a sheriff prior to me and Toretti, who not only talked about attempting to murder people, we think he did?
And he set trial for that, right? He
For
stood
every
trial.
time he threatened to kill someone. He stood trial for that, you think? Because that's incredibly naive if that's what you think.
Were we in a
No.
position to fix it then? Do we want to let that be our standard because it's happened in the past? Because now that we have the ability to actually take action over those things, we just want to say, oh, well, this happened in the past, so let's let it happen again.
Yeah, it's just I don't know why
I
we're
don't think
doing
we should let it
wildballism.
happen. I don't think we should let it happen because it happened in the past. But I think we need to acknowledge our biases, in which we were more willing to let it happen with Pred for some reason than with Brian.
I think
I don't know, Brian
That's
said a lot of
not-
fuck things.
that's not the fairest thing, Owen, and I don't disagree with you necessarily, but things were definitely different, and we were not in the positions we're in. You know, I felt powerless against him. I tried to get him prosecuted many times. It never worked. I don't know if it's very fair to make that argument. But I'm just not sure about this whole sniping thing because we were planning on going to war, right?
Yeah.
Not at that point.
I mean, I think we were.
Yeah, I mean, the trajectory was such that we were going to go to war.
We
Whether
were
or
on
not
a
there were
collision
negotiations planned or
course.
not.
But so you're saying that before the treaty broke down, we were planning on going to war?
Yeah, are you that naive that you don't think that there were plans made just in case it fell through?
Divine's affidavit was out at that point. We knew they were constructing things on that island.
Bass had HVTU create a plan to have 16 people go over and pull back Divine if his cover got blown.
We had intelligence
In
there was
May.
a bomb factory, and you think they were going to turn it over willingly in negotiations, and we didn't come up with a plan to invade if they didn't?
Right. Okay, fair enough. Regardless, what right do we have to assassinate someone if that's the case?
I just question how far it actually came towards assassination versus talking about it. And
Conspiring.
I mean, the part that we're not talking about is that how much of this was Brian's plan, how much of it was Axel's, and how much of it was Bundy's. And now maybe Bundy feels bad and is saying did something different, but you know, I'm questioning maybe if Bundy had a change of heart and trying to cover for himself a little bit because you know.
Can we pump the brakes for a second?
Okay.
I just got a text from Bundy asking if Brian really resigned or if it was something on Twitter.
It's another Silas situation where we don't have to do anything.
God, dude, that'd be such a pain in the ass.
Considering LSBN is about to make a
Apparently, he's
statement.
already talked to Ursula. Oh my God.
Eve
Or she's already got
retweeted it.
Yeah, I see that.
Said something about how he formally quit the PD and is running for Senate?
What the fuck?
Huh? Okay,
And he
maybe that's
retweeted
just stupid.
Shelly Smith, of course, classic.
Brian did retweet the thing from me.
Yeah, he retweeted it. So has he quit? What are we even doing here anymore?
Someone want to call him?
Yeah,
Did he do an
I'll call
Axel,
him.
which was doing a Silos?
Yeah, the bigger man move just to quit before he can even. come up with what we want to do to him. It's crazy because you know what?